My name is Mario Lemons, and this is Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast where we highlight the strength of our city, the spirit of our people, and share your stories of compassion.
Well, welcome to the show, Mario. I am so glad that you were able to join the podcast. The work that you are doing in Detroit City is amazing, and your life story is amazing. So I'm just going to dive right into this with the hardest question of our conversation.
Okay.
Who are you, and how do you define compassion?
Got it. Who am I, and how do I define compassion? Well, I am an educator at heart. I am a principal by trade in a school at Detroit, Michigan. But the work that I do in various sectors of the community very much so come from a very compassionate space because I am an educator. Everything that I do, I want to empower, I want to educate, I want to enlighten people. So that they can become the best them that they can become. And so whatever I'm doing, whether it's teaching you theater classes, whether it's speaking on podcasts like this, whether it's being a principal of a whole school community, I'm always thinking of ways that I can support communities and be compassionate and help other people to be compassionate as well. So that's me, Mario Lemons.
And how do you define or describe compassion?
Well, I think that it comes, the compassion really is the way that you emote with other people. Empathy is something that comes from the heart. It's different from sympathy, right? You can feel bad for someone and like, oh, but really have no connection. But when we think about empathy, it's like, hey, I can really connect with you. I can understand how that would feel if it were me, even if I've never experienced that before. And so when you bring in empathy into a community, it allows you to become way more compassionate in the ways that you interact with one another, but then also the decisions that you make. Because as we think about our roles in a community, whether it's, roles of leadership or if it's supporting roles, if we're walking and being in the space of compassion, then your decision making is different because you're considerate of other people. You're more empathetic. You're more thoughtful in the things that you do. And so compassion for me is truly walking in the place of empathy, that you really do care about your fellow man.
Yeah, that's exactly it from my perspective as well. How that is expressed is vastly different from culture to culture and person to person. But right now we're in the midst of an unprecedented crisis that is affecting literally the globe. Yeah. Now, as a leader of a school, that means you have kids that you're responsible for, parents that you're responsible for, and team members, teachers that you're responsible for, and probably a whole host of other people I'm not considering. How have you used compassion to lead through this crisis?
Well, it's a daily journey, for one, because, as you said it yourself, it's such unprecedented times. It's uncharted territory. Like almost every moment we're like, oh, we didn't consider that, or well, didn't realize that this would be a challenge as well. And so giving each other grace along the way. I just talked to my staff this week because we just launched a couple other initiatives within our school as we are doing remote learning. And I remember telling them, I said, hey, this may not work, but we are really going to try. But give yourselves grace first, because you might mess up. You might have to change things, but also give families and kids some grace because this is so new for everybody, and that there's so many unspoken factors and nuances that come with just existing during this time that we don't even think about. And so as we are expecting kids to do this, and this, and families to show up and, pull their weight, we have to also be very compassionate with each other to understand that life is very difficult for everybody right now, and so I've been really conscious with that and really empowering my staff to know that, hey, we're going to do all that we can to support families and do everything that we can to make sure that our young people are still engaged and learning, but also we have to create a human experience and have to remember that there are real lives that we're dealing with. We're not talking just numbers, right? I have 25 kids in my class, and 5 of them didn't do the work, and 15 of them hopped on the Google Hangout or whatever the case may be. Like, these are real people who have vast things that they're experiencing during this time, grief and confusion, isolation, all of those things that come along with it. So that's one. Or sort of like the overarching sort of vibe, if you will, that I'm really empowering my staff to have in my community. But then the very practical things that we're doing that I believe is very much so in line with Compassionate Las Vegas is that we actually have been giving out laptops to our students and really going above and beyond to make sure that all of our families have access to internet. We've also had a mobile pantry that comes to our school, and we're making sure that we're being safe with social distancing. So what happens is every 2 weeks, which today was one of the days, so every other Tuesday, families can actually drive into our parking lot, and we literally have them pop the trunk, and we give them 2 weeks worth of food. We're talking like pounds of potatoes and peanut butter and milk and other sort of produce so that families have the necessities that they need to take care of their families. And then the other practical thing that we've been doing that I believe is very compassionate is we've been getting a lot of donations to our school because of the work that we've been doing above and beyond other schools in Detroit. And so we have a whole thousands of dollars worth of money for a fund as a relief for some families, because there unfortunately been several of our families who have been stricken with grief because of some family members who have passed away from COVID-19. And so helping families with financial support for funeral expenses, also helping them to be able to meet those needs if they've been laid off, and like the unemployment situation, as crazy as it's been, being able to help bridge those gaps and make sure families have what they need. And so, again, those are maybe 3 or so, specific things that we've done with the food, finance, technology. But then again, all of that could not have been done if I didn't create a culture of compassion and empathy, and also like giving each other grace along the way. So
that is beyond exceptional. I am thrilled to hear it. And I didn't know about the depth of what you were providing. I knew about the pantry and that sort of thing, but to hear that big picture, it's inspiring. And this show, of course, exists to amplify hope and to know that good things are still happening in this very difficult time. Yeah. And in your own way, you are transforming your city because of this. The impact that you're having just by providing something as basic as food. But it's basic, but it's essential. And it really can change someone's circumstance from day to day, just to know that, there's a place where I can get the essentials, the necessities, and I will be okay for 2 weeks. Yeah. That makes a difference in people's lives. And I don't think we can understate how important that is. Yeah.
Well, it's been a complete pleasure. It's been a lot of extra work, of course, but, the nature of what we do as community members, let alone teachers or whatever our title is, but as a member of the community that I grew up in, that I went to high school in, and now I'm the leader of a school, that I'm responsible, in my opinion, to do my part. And so while it may be some extra steps along the way to make sure that things are happening, I think it's those necessary steps, because it's in these times, as you say, that communities are tested to see if they really are compassionate, and you have opportunities to do what I believe is right. You can choose to do it or not. And so we're choosing very intentionally to do what we feel is right for our community, especially because the zip code that I'm in is one of the hottest spots in the state of Michigan for the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's so many challenges. I mean, we could talk all day about some of the nuances and demographics that are affected in our community. But if we can do our part, I think that we can surely make a difference in our community. And it's our responsibility, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you said 2 words. You just said them again. I'm responsible. And that's leadership. So in this time of crisis, that ownership of the responsibility is something we don't necessarily see at all levels. How have you stayed centered in yourself with the weight of that responsibility? because you have little lives, big lives, all of these in your hands. So that can be overwhelming for someone, especially someone that is empathetic. What are you doing so that you're okay?
That's a good question. People, I'm not going to say people don't ask that question, because there have been some families and people who have like loved on me and made sure that like I was okay, because they see me like running around and, sending emails and messages and coordinating things. So those are moments I really do hold them to high regard. So when families or people are like, "Hey, Mario, shout out to you. I thank you so much for your work." I don't take that lightly. And so that fills my bucket, right? Especially in moments where I'm like super tired, I'm up late. And then I get a text, from a family member like, "Hey, I just wanted to say thank you so much for dropping that food off," because I've done that before where families weren't able to come to the school, and I just like pulled up in the driveway and had the kids, come grab the stuff out the trunk for me. And so like those little moments like that really do fuel me to keep doing this type of work. But even if that hadn't been something that I got regularly, the things that I do for myself, I have very protected time in the morning to kind of like get my mind right and really take time to express gratitude, to also like self-care and make sure that I'm in a well space before I even do anything, out in the public. And that really does help me to be able to be the best me I can be, because oftentimes for people like myself, like we give so much and then we're empty, and then we don't refill ourselves with rest, with eating right, with exercise. And so then when we go back out into the world and we're supposed to be giving, we don't have much to give. And then you're wondering like, well, Mario's a little cranky today. You don't think? I've been eating frozen food all week. No. So protect the time in the morning, as well as, those affirmations. But then also eating healthy. I kind of alluded to that. I am 75% vegetarian and like 25% pescatarian. So I would be vegan if I didn't love cheese and seafood so much. So, so I really do take that very seriously, my diet, because I do feel so much better when I'm eating fresh foods and, fruits and vegetables, and not a whole lot of junk. And I also don't particularly like doing exercises, but my friends who are around me are like, they won't let me down. Like they won't let me be a slacker. So I just finished this challenge with a friend yesterday. It was a 30-day challenge for squats and push-ups. So every day I had to do some form of exercise to meet this challenge, because my friend was texting me like, "I just cashed in," which is like his phrase of what I just did my part of the challenge today. And so I'm like, okay, but no. So of course, it's funny to say, that I don't like the exercise, but it's so necessary for so many reasons, for your health, but also for your mental state, to be able to like push through and accomplish your goals, because those type of goals really translate to, achieving certain things that you have to achieve, at work or like in the community that might be difficult. So as I'm training myself, both physically and mentally, is really training me to be able to go out and fight the good fight, and continue to show compassion with the community, even when it's moments where I don't want to, or even when it's moments that I'm like, oh, do I have to? Yes, you got a challenge. Your challenge is to be compassionate and serve the community, just like them push-ups,
Right. That's actually a good challenge. We might do that #compassion challenge.
I love it. Why not? I'll be down.
Good. But you just gave us a ton. So protected time in the morning,
Yes.
doing affirmations,
Mhm.
staying healthy by eating well and being physically active. All of that is part of the light work of being a helper, of being someone who is living in this world in a compassionate way, because taking care of oneself removes that burden from others. And it also models for people what is possible. Now, you don't look a day over 55, so tell us what it's like to be a young leader in this space.
Got it. You're right. I'm not 55. but I am older than most people think I am, but that's neither here nor there. So for me, I think my posture for sure helps me to be able to operate in various spaces. I very rarely get pushback from people who think I'm younger than I am or, whatever. But my charisma oftentimes in my youth allows me to be able to inspire people to jump on board with my crazy ideas to like change the world. And then also I have a very strong core group of people who are just as passionate as I am about accomplishing goals and meeting the needs of the community. And so it doesn't feel like I'm the young person because I have other people in my age group who are just as educated as I am, with master's degrees and years of experience in the community. And so while my youth might in some sectors, be at disadvantage, my experience and the people, my cohort, the people that come along with me with these various ideas and visions to make them come to pass, it allows me to have a lot more validity and allows people to be more willing to follow, because a quote I read said something like, if you're a leader and you don't have anybody following you, and by following is very loose, but like people who are like buying into your vision and like supporting the work you do, you're just taking a walk by yourself. And so, my leadership style is all about connecting with people, sharing with people how they could also benefit from, my ideas and the work that we do, but also leaning on other people's strengths, right? I might be the person that's in the front, quote unquote, leading, but I cannot do the work that I do without other people in their respective lanes and their expertise really pushing towards accomplishing our goals and doing it from a place of love and compassion as well. So
would you say that you are responsible for how your team executes, whether it's failure or success?
I do. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. And sometimes if you fail, quote unquote, it can feel like, oh my God, like I failed. So I try not to do that much pressure because I understand that we all play a part in making things happen. But I certainly do put a lot of the onus on like the leader and like making sure that I am the one who is holding other people accountable and inspiring people, but also leading by example. So if things aren't getting done, what does that look like? Does it mean that, I inspired them to continue to do it? Do I give them the resources to support them along the ways that they can accomplish it? Or do I just step up and do it myself and then have a reflection moment with the teammates later? But that's kind of a case by case. But I do believe that the leader has a huge role to play in accomplishing goals.
You have a very clear and a most precise vision that's just evident. And in the way that you approach, your education and your community there, how did you form this compassionate worldview? A lot of what you say would have been prior to this COVID outbreak, considered completely radical and unrealistic. I think now people are starting to recognize the importance of meeting others' needs, even when they don't, quote unquote, deserve it. But how did you form this worldview of compassion?
That's a good question. A couple of things that come to mind. One, I am a world traveler. And so I've been all over the world. And so I've seen communities that have a lot less than we have, and they are still committed to making sure that everybody in the community is well taken care of. Everybody's playing their part, and so that just gives me a different perspective of what's possible, because if all I knew was what I experienced in the United States, I would have a very limited view, and maybe I wouldn't be as open to what's possible.
Where have you been? Where are some of the places that maybe stand out?
Yeah, so one, I was just looking at one of my art pieces. I absolutely cannot wait to go back to South Africa. That was a wonderful time there. I helped build a school in Guatemala, which was a lot of fun. And that community really did change a whole lot of my perspective. I've been to Egypt. Germany. I've been to, I'd studied abroad in the Virgin Islands in an indigenous community. So those are some. So I've been to Jamaica, which was awesome too. I really do enjoy vacationing and that sort of thing. But I'll also spend a lot of time in the culture. And so if I don't have time to really be engulfed in the culture, I'm not really interested in that particular trip usually. But those vacations that I just talked about, really, I did spend some significant time in the community, especially South Africa, because I studied abroad for a summer there. So being able to meet the people and hear their perspectives has really given me a broader view of what's possible and what's needed, right? And so when we think about our community, while we, whether it's still poverty where we may be, like it's nothing compared to what other parts of the world are experiencing. And in spite of that, families and communities in other parts of the world are happy, but also they are way more committed to making sure that the whole community is doing well. So that's one.
So getting outside of your bubble has really helped to form that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It really does allow you to put things in perspective. Because I think sometimes you believe that all that exists is what you have, right? And like that's another way that I practice gratitude is like, hey, I've seen poverty, right? I've seen, hunger and people who really don't have much, and yet they still are happy, yet they still find ways to stay connected to one another. And so when I think back on some of the experiences I've had as a child, I see ways that we have been able to survive throughout the years because of that community feel. And maybe I wouldn't have noticed that had I not gone out of the country and seen sort of families and older community members being able to be the rock in the community. So I'm able to be like, oh, wait, that's my grandma. Oh, she's kind of like, my auntie, and that kind of thing. And so for me, observing and like being able to be involved in international travel has really helped. But then also really being a part of my community and seeing the ways that people just pick up the pieces and pull their weight. And really, I feel like I am who I am because of a village of people, both, blood relatives, extended family, church family. I was also very involved in the arts. So my arts community, certainly has helped me to be who I am and have those perspectives of what the responsibility of a community member is. Arts, education, and the experiences I've had in performing arts. I used to be a part of a theater company when I was in middle school and high school. I ended up starting my own theater company and producing plays and concerts and I still do consulting work and teach some youth theater classes. But like the community that you create within the arts industry is very much so a community of possibilities, because you're literally creating family, you're creating art, and so like the possibilities as I am now as a principal of a school, like nothing is impossible to me. It's just like I've seen things sort of manifest out of what people could perceive as nothing. And because I've seen that internationally, I've seen that in my family, I've seen that in the theater world, in the arts community, I feel like I can do that in the education space. And I have seen that in the education space. Even when I was a classroom teacher, there will be kids who come in super low academically. And as we continue to dream together and work and put the work in to help support and learn and grow, by the end of the year, this kid is like, above grade level. Like that's like, it's mind blowing to see. But had I not had the experiences that I had to understand, like, hey, we're gonna have to pull this partner in, we're gonna have to bring this resource in, we're gonna have to come one-to-one, have some one-on-one conversations and push each other. And then, had I not had those experiences, then I don't think I would have been as optimistic and compassionate as I am to really impact communities at very high levels. Sorry, I'm talking a lot, but
Good guess. That's what you're supposed
as I'm
to
talking,
do.
I'm like getting some revelation, and like processing through, what I've experienced and why I'm even able to do the work that I do. And it's certainly, like I said, because of the experiences I've had growing up.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you're doing exactly what I hoped you would, which is just share from your heart and from your essence. So one thing that just stood out with what you just said was really it was the community that surrounded you that gave you the vision to believe in the impossible. So here in Las Vegas, of course, we're hit really, really hard because of the shutdown that's global. We are a global destination. Tourism is our industry here. And so just the few little tidbits you shared, that should give hope and inspiration to let people know that even though times are tough now and they look like they're insurmountable odds, you can do the impossible as long as you do it together. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's exactly, you put the nail right on the head there. Yeah.
Good. Well, one other shift I want to take and then we'll wrap up. You apparently look like you may not be a person that we'll say is of the majority ethnicity, also known as
Okay.
a minority.
Yeah. All right.
How has that impacted your view of compassion, being a minority in a world that isn't necessarily as favorable as it should be?
Right. I'm gonna be honest. My perspective of my Blackness and me being a person of color has evolved throughout the years. I was really privileged to go to an elementary school that was an Afrocentric elementary school. So you'll see me wear kente colored stuff or like African art or stuff like that, just because that's kind of was my upbringing. So it was like, hey, it was a school that was very much so special and unique to the community because we understood, or the elders understood, that young people needed to feel empowered to be who they are, to know that they are beautiful, that they are educated, that they are, they're special, right? And so Rosa Parks used to come to my school frequently to visit because she lived in the same apartment building as my principal. Several other significant African-American people came to my school to visit, and that in itself gave me a level of support and like really empowered me to know that like just because I'm Black doesn't mean that I can't achieve well. And so I've always been a high achiever because of that background. Now, obviously being in Detroit, growing up in Detroit, it's majority African American. You go to a Black church, you go to a Black school, Black everything. So like my view on like who I was really wasn't challenged growing up because I knew who I was. I knew that I had so many things that were possible and I was accomplishing things at high level since I was in elementary school. Now, it wasn't until I got into college where I went to Michigan State University, and then I realized that everybody in the world is not Black, but also not everybody in the world has even seen a Black person.
Yeah.
And have views of people of color as being positive and smart and, like that the things that I knew that people of color were able to accomplish, I realized once I got to Michigan State that there were people who never learned that, but also learned just the contrary, that people of color aren't worth talking to, aren't intelligent, aren't qualified to be at Michigan State. So I was confronted with all of those sort of preconceived notions of who I was. And I remember I was the only Black guy in my dorm my first year. I had 3 white roommates, and for the most part they were really nice, but there were several racist people across the hall from us, and so we had a lot of issues with racism. And really the 4 years that I was at Michigan State, I ended up being involved in a lot of activism work because my last year in particular, we had found a doll hanging from a ceiling, like from the neck, and it was like a voodoo doll, but it was like being lynched. And then there was like 60 racist incidents that we documented in the first 6 weeks. So I've been a part of this struggle since I was about 18 years old, when I realized that, hey, not everybody loves me for who I am, and so as a result, it has allowed me to really tap back into my upbringing and remind myself that I am somebody. And that,
how do you navigate that space though? So you're in a dorm with people that are overtly racist. You're dealing
Yep.
with campus incidents that are really traumatizing.
Mhm.
And yet you persevered. You obviously graduated and succeeded. But did you work to change the perspective, or how did you even just exist within that space?
I did. It's just I I wasn't raised to be a coward, and so but I also was raised to educate. And when I talk about being an educator, I remember being in my dorm and a guy across the hall was listening to some rap music, which is fine, but he had it playing really loud, and then he kept yelling just the N word. There was no other lyrics that he would say, or he was saying it really loud. Mind you, I'm the only black guy on the floor. I live directly across the hall from him, and I just remember thinking like, this can't be real. Oh my goodness. And so I really almost tapped into, my ancestors and like, what should I do? It's like, you know what? I'm gonna confront him. I'm not afraid of a conversation. If he puts his hands on me, that's a different thing. But if it means, hey, let me go over here and have a conversation with him and let him know, like, that's not cool. That's not appropriate. I'm offended. I don't like it when you do that. Then hopefully he can learn. And what I did was I remember I went across the hall and I was like, hey, and he's like, you could see like his face, like, because he obviously was doing it on purpose. And I just was like, dude, like, stop. I don't like it when you do that. Like, please stop saying the N word. It's very offensive. And he's like, okay. And like, he turned the music off, and that was that. But not all of my interactions with people who were overtly racist went that well. But what I ended up doing is that freshman year, I joined the freshman class council, which was a part of the student association, like the student government, if you will, at Michigan State. But there was a specific board that was addressed the issues of freshmen, because you could just imagine, transitioning to college. There's people from, up north who've never seen anybody of color, and there's people from Detroit who've all only seen, Black people, or maybe been a first generation college student. So I was like, hey, I'm going to run for president of the freshman class council. And I won that election my freshman year in college. And I remember just really working hard to make sure that the experience for freshmen was very smooth. And so when I got there, we did different bills and things of that nature. And one of the bills was to say someone had proposed that they should check what type of race you want as your roommate. Like, they wanted to do like a survey coming into this, and I got stories. So it comes across my desk, or, part of the conversation. They're like, oh, that'd be great. I'm the only Black guy, of course, on the student council. And they're like, hey, I think that'd be cool, because then that way people can find people that are more compatible. Maybe you're a night owl, maybe you're, this particular major, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, and I looked at it and I said, but now they're asking like about race, like what race you would prefer. And they're like, yeah, well, some people don't feel comfortable. I was like, there's no way we gonna have this pushed through and it's not gonna go far. It is not passing here at all.
Yeah.
I remember it being this big uproar because affirmative action had just gotten disbanded right when I, at least in Michigan, right when I got to college. And there was this roaring sort of murmuring around, like, if people of color who were at Michigan State really earned it, and if it was because of affirmative action. So I really had those conversations a lot, where it's like, let's talk about the facts. It's disbanded as of, a couple years prior. And I also have this grade point average, this ACT. Your friend didn't get in because he didn't qualify. I didn't feel his part, and I currently still have a 3.8, GPA, that kind of thing. So those were conversations that was already happening on campus. And so when I got that, proposal in front of me, I'm like, this is my time to actually stop something like this from being a part of a conversation that, who knows, if the right people aren't at the table, it could have gone far, and maybe even been a conversation across the board that maybe got adopted, or, who knows what could have happened. And then fast forward to that following year, I became an intercultural aide, which is like a RA, but for people of color, or to help transition people of color, international students, and first year college students. And so my role for my sophomore, junior, and senior year in college was to be in the halls, like in the residence halls, and work in collaboration with the RA, but to bring diversity in, to produce events that allow people in the dorms to get together and have conversation about race and ethnicity and culture. We did different taste testing Taste Fest, from all over the world. We had game nights that intentionally engage families and people from other cultures. And then we were that point person for some of those racist incidents that were happen. If something were to happen, I don't know, for example, when the guy was yelling the N-word across the hall, I went to my intercultural aid to have that conversation. Or I would have if I didn't feel comfortable going straight to that guy. And so I became that for students within the Michigan State University dorms for the next 3 years. And then my junior and senior year, I became a board member for the Black Student Alliance. And so that was the umbrella group for all of the African-American based organizations. And so my senior year, I was the president. And that's, like I said, when we documented 60 racist incidents that happened throughout the campus in the first 6 weeks. We did huge marches and protests. That was the same year that Trayvon Martin was killed. So we did tons of protests around that and conversations about how to really coexist and work along color lines and cultures. And so the work that I did was some serious stuff.
Yeah.
But as I think about it, in retrospect, again, I'm an educator, always been. I'm always looking to help support people to be able to think differently and to engage with one another with compassion. Because guess what? We're all in this world together, and in order for us to make the best of it, but also make an impact that's positive and progresses us as a community forward, we have to find ways to have difficult conversations. We have to care about each other enough to challenge each other if we are not being compassionate, if we are coming from a place of hatred or, disdain, because, if you allow that type of disrespect and, lack of compassion to go on, what does that say about our community? And, of course, community is very broad of a term, but at Michigan State, we are a whole community, but we also represent so many other communities. So if I don't do my part to help push people's thinking and continue to support growth and development across all types of cultures and communities, then you're going to go to your community and keep thinking that way. And keep pushing for some of these negative ideologies and things that are tearing our cultures apart and pitting us against one another. And so hopefully, I'm not saying that I'm the change agent that, the Martin Luther King of my day, but imagine if some of these people who came to the conversations that I've had, on campus and the big rallies and, things of that nature, what if they didn't come to that? What if they didn't have the conversation? Who knows what they would be capable of, moving forward. And so that's me. I've been like that since I was a kid, was like that in college. And then, I could tell you stories of how I pushed for, people to think differently, even as an educator. But, as a teacher, as an adult and as a principal. But does that answer your question? Sorry.
It does. It absolutely does. And it gives me a lot. So you'll see some of these as Instagram posts too, because you gave us some great quotes there too.
I'm with it.
What I really love is you've highlighted some things some previous guests have said, which is the change comes in the conversation. But you've also stressed the importance of being present and being present as your authentic self. If you weren't at the table, if you weren't there in the room, if you didn't own that space and truly express your thoughts, then things could have happened differently and just kept being the same as they've been and not move forward. So being present in that space was your act of compassion, and educating was your act of compassion, and confronting was your act of compassion. A lot of times people feel compassion is weak or meek or any of those things that don't cause change, but it's really much more. And I think you expressed a lot of that in a really, really great way. So I want to wrap us up here, but I want to let people know how to get in contact with you. So how do they connect with you online, or do you have a website, anything like that?
Yeah, I can be contacted. You can send me an email, lemons, Lemons, M as in Mario, the number one at gmail.com. I would love to engage and have conversations with other people about this type of work. But then you also can follow me on Facebook, just Mario Lemons, Lemons, or you could follow me on Instagram, which has a lot of my travel pictures and some of my inspirational quotes. But that is Mario, not Luigi. That's
So spell that for us. Mario, not Luigi.
Yep, all one word, no underscores, just MarioNotLuigi. So at MarioNotLuigi. Just a little fun.
I love it.
Tagline there, but yeah.
Well, I close every podcast with kind of a summary of how you express compassion in the world. So if you, in one or two sentences, could just explain how you're embodying compassion in Detroit, which of course ripples out even to Las Vegas and beyond.
One quote that comes to mind is what I share, was something that I grew up with, but also things that I say to my young people when I have challenging conversations with them, or if I'm like really like in a space where like there is a difficult conversation. And so I'll say, I love you too much to let you just act a fool. And so, for me, I think that my approach to compassion is that I love myself, I love my community, I love this world too much to not do my part, to push people's thinking, but also to step up to the plate and meet the needs of the community. I love you too much. There may be some moments where I'm like, I don't want to, or, this is a hard decision, it's gut-wrenching, but the love and the compassion that I have will not allow me to sit idle, will not allow me to not do my part. So that's how I show compassion.
Well, we'll leave it there.
Thank you for having me.
Treat others how you'd like to be treated.
And that's the golden rule.
Camp Anytown has taught me that knowledge is power, and if I utilize my voice, I can make a difference in the world, no matter how big or small.
I learned that as long as we stand together, we can accomplish so much more.
What Camp Anytown has taught me is that I am not crazy to think I can change the world. I'm crazy if I think I can do it alone.
Camp Anytown has taught me that just because I'm different does not mean I don't belong.
I learned at Camp Anytown to be more compassionate because you never know what somebody else is going through.
Camp Anytown is a no-cost youth leadership camp that trains high school students in diversity, community, and inclusivity. When you choose the Golden Rule license plate, you play a part in a local camp that helps shape a better tomorrow. Learn more at dmvnv.com.